Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 7, a brand new cherry flavor. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up with the whole Lisa and Code thing. I think it's so fascinating that I think Code might be the first time she's ever felt true remorse in the show. To a certain extent, there was the whole, screwing over Lou and everything, but even then, I'm like, I don't know if, this is the first time I feel like she genuinely felt bad of, wow, everything I've gotten mixed up into is, screwed someone over I care about. Jonathan, she felt bad about, but I feel like that hasn't really weighed on her too much because she runs into him later on and be like, oh, good, I know exactly where you are. So there's that element to it, but, because that's also, that's a middle finger to Lou more so than anything. And so, everything she's ever done, to be fair, James, he did kill you, or at least attempted to kill you, so screw him, so you got no love lost in that situation. But it's Roy feels like a means to win. Everyone feels like a means to win. Even Code was, but I definitely don't feel like she has some remorse. She at least appears to try to have some remorse when it comes to Mary, but even then, she said it last episode, it's she means what I want, I let her mean. So it's Lisa doesn't give a shit about her either. So it's Code might be I feel genuinely the way she mourned over him, we've never seen her act like that. Because even when she found out Jonathan was in the situation, he was oh well, and took him to the hospital, that was about it. That was all she kind of really did about that. She kind of felt bad for a moment, but she removed the knife from Code's eye. She tightened up his shoelaces, laid him on the chair, covered him up, and laid next to him. That shows real remorse. It also shows how much she cared about him in comparison to Mary, too, because your relationship meant nothing because, your eyeball, you literally ate your eyeball and everything. To be fair, she says she doesn't remember much, but which now, in retrospect, I'm I don't know if I 100% believe that or not. I don't even know if Boro 100% believes that, but it's you waited for 2 days. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe given enough time, she'd move on. Maybe that's just the nature of who she is. But I like to believe it's specifically Code that brought that out of her. But at the same time, your boy Lou is spiraling because of all of this, because he hasn't heard anything. Well, Ralph calls saying he hasn't heard anything from James, and it's well, what's going on there? So he decides to call about Alvin, and it's cool. They haven't found a replacement director. It's what if we gave her movie back? Which even Alvin's dude, I've been telling you since the beginning to give her movie back, but you're the one that kept pushing me on every point. It's yeah, and things have gone so far, out there, and with everything that's going on, that it's kind of it's sad that it took till now. All you had to do was give her back her movie before now, but it's you were challenged and you wanted to prove yourself. That's all it was. You were butthurt that she didn't accept your advances, and now you're trying to make the excuse of this is the way things work, even though this was all personal. It's is Lisa in the right? No. But is he in the right? No. Everyone's a dick in this situation in that regard. So him calling up, it's because I love Alvin, call her up. It's because she might be actually dead this time. So he calls. Luckily, Lisa is at her place, which I should also note, I don't think they focus on it in any other episode. If you notice, the freaking plant's grown to the point it's outside. It's wrapping around the sign near the street. And I'm that's crazy. How freaking big is that thing gonna go? The fact is he's even gotten to that point already. For all we know, it might have already spread to even more rooms in that place. Because we've only seen 2 rooms in that entire building. Because she's the only one that lives in there, so no one else would know. But she picks up the phone and is obviously seeing those tears in her eyes. It's oh, you tried to kill me, plus you killed my friend, which he was yeah, I wasn't the producer on that. But for him, it's right, we can have a talk, you can bring my son, we'll try to get that reversed. It's I told you, he's Boros now. And obviously for him, it's well, I'm the man who will do anything. Using, obviously, Alvin's nearby, so he's using the vein of using it in the vein of using it as this is a book we're adapting. It's about a father who's willing to get revenge, do anything for, revenge for what happened to his son, which I love that Lisa doesn't skip a beat. where are you, Lou? Just keeps asking that over and over again. He's like, trying to keep appearances. I even love that. It's like, oh, so what's the name of that book? And he's like, Bob's Revenge. And Alvin's almost got this look of disgust on his face. Oh, that's a shitty title. He's almost got that look. Side note, I'm blanking. I don't think I've ever, that actor, I've seen him in multiple things. I want to say Happy might be the most recent thing I ever saw him in. To be fair, that's been a couple years, but I'm like, I feel like that. I'm trying to remember if there's anything more recent that he's popped up in. That's what immediately comes to my, God, what was his character's name? I'm already blinking on his character from Happy. It was a weird, Smoothie? I think that was his name, Smoothie. I knew because I remember it being something super weird, and now I remember what his circumstances are and why that name was so apt of a description. Regardless, so there's that. But Lisa's dead set on revenge. She goes to Burroughs taking care of Mary. I was like, so I was wondering. I was like, okay, so. Is that going to be what I think it is about? I was like, oh, I brought that up last episode. I was like, can that eye get regrown or something like that? Because we don't know how that whole thing works fully. But I'm like, Bora was like, yeah, you might not even want to leave. I'm like, that sounds super ominous. Like you want her to stay there. And I'm like, is that because it's personal vendetta? Because it's like, oh, well, I was about to say, like, is it because she screwed up and she's mad at, or are you looking for her to be your next vessel instead of Lisa? I don't know. Is it kind of a thing of, since you do know more of her and Lisa's history, that you know that maybe she's responsible for, because I don't think she definitely didn't know about Coda at the time. But so I'm like, I don't know. Like I would lean more towards I'm about to snatch that body and make it my new body. Like, I don't know if Lisa was supposed to be the beginning of that and she found a more apt person, or maybe Lisa was always just kind of a side other thing, which we'll get into that more later on, of like maybe that was kind of more personal on that front. But regardless, Bora was doing all that. Lisa rolls up, licks to toe, and I love that she has this look of disgust before she does it. I'm like, really? All the stuff that Boro's gotten you to eat, all the kittens you keep throwing up, which I even love later on. It's like, yeah, if you're about to throw up, warn me so I can look away. And she looks at her, she's like, okay, throwing up kittens is different. I'm like, how is that any different? It's okay. It's so weird that you, being the witch that you are, that you have like such a weak stomach apparently to stuff like that. But yeah, Lisa was all about it. It's like, cool. I'm gonna crush my enemy because I'm gonna know where Lou is. It's like, cool. That's only step one of it. So all you did was poison yourself, so now we have to go through all the other phases. We got to do the blood magic and the sex magic. Sex magic you can do by yourself. Wait, the egg, there's actually 2 yolks. You need someone else involved, because she's like, hey, I'll have you been singing 4 yolks. I'm like, I wonder, is that the most you can get? I mean, I guess that's like you need a whole for some type of situation, or like, could it turn, I guess, if the yolk cracks in the right place, it's like, I guess maybe the more powerful the circumstances are, maybe that affects, or maybe it is just kind of a luck of a draw. Like, oh, if you're lucky, you'll need 1 yolk. Oh, you need 2. Oh, you need 3, or you need 4. Maybe you need 7. I don't know. I'm curious like how high that would go, since 4 is the highest she's seen so far. So, but it's like, oh, she's like, I feel kind of like high right now or something like that. She's, oh, I'm feeling sick. It's like, oh no, that's not you feeling sick. That's not you getting sick. That's you dying. And it's just like Boro being like, right, I don't want you to die, which I thought was so interesting. I was like, oh, you do care about it. But it's like, nah, it's self-interest, which we'll get to later. So it's like, cool. You need to find someone to bang. I'm like, hey, first person came to my mind was Roy, and first person that came to her mind. So it's like, all right, let's get this done. Roy, and I love that Roy's kind of like, oh, I want to stay away from you. But he's like, is that Lisa Nova? Let her in. So, like, Lisa's kind of like, okay. And he's like, oh, wow, you look kind of restless or something, like there's something like off about you. And she's like, yeah, that's the sex magic. And it's just, not like, she was like, I need the hand with the sex magic. And he's like, oh, you're looking a little off. And she's like, yeah, that's the poison. I'm like, once again, we're in this weird world. We're just like casually dropping it. He's like, I don't want to get mixed up with you. I've done a lot of stuff in my life, like, that could easily lead me to death. I should be dead by now, but I'm not. And just for him, like, for the first time, despite everything that's ever happened in his life, all the reckless stuff he's ever done, Lisa's what scares him the most. And it's just like, for him, he kind of wants to take down. He's like, hell, I'm nominated for, like, was it a Golden Globe? So he wants to kind of live. Like, he's kind of, Lisa actually scared him into living. which I found that so interesting. But I also love the fact is that she goes, "Oh, you're not scared of me. You're scared of losing control," which I'm like, bullshit. I'm sure he's legitimately scared of you because, like, he said to himself, like, I've done a lot of messed up things in my life, but, like, wrapping up a dead body and disposing of it like that kind of scared. Like, that's why I'm like, yeah. He even admits later on, he's like, honestly, it is partially I am scared of you too. But it is the thing of, like, you know, she's like, I don't have to, you know, right, if you don't want to do the whole thing, you don't have to. And they still bang it out anyway, which I love that Boro just casually, like, swipes the sweat off her back. And I'm like, we're just, like, neither one of you are noticing that? Or is it just you're so caught up in the moment that neither one of you notice that? But what I thought was so fascinating is for the first time in the series, that thing that's been, like, bothering, that thing that kept popping out towards Lisa the entire time. For the first time, it and Boro lock eyes. And I was like, that's so fascinating. Because the entire time it's like, oh, ignore it. And she's never the one to see it. It's always Lisa, which I thought, like, and now it's reaching out for her. I'm like, wait, it wants you, not Lisa. Lisa's just a means to an end to get to you or something. I was like, wait, okay. And then that kind of solidifies something. I think I don't want to give myself too much credit because it's been a while in between even episodes 6 and 7. I want to say I threw it out there that I think that thing might be the Jaguar from the story. But like I said, I'm trying not to give myself too much credit. But I thought that maybe. Especially because it's like, oh, finding out it's on the other side, like the Jaguar is alive, but like on the other side and stuff like that and can't get through that whole thing. But obviously, there's also the aspect of you need the blood aspect to the whole situation, and it needs to be like the flesh of dead body in its prime or something. Which I'm like, didn't you get that from Jamie, or is it trying to supposed to be like shit talking Jamie, being like, not Jamie, James, that James isn't in his prime or past his prime? Because like she did feed on some flesh, but I guess it's like, right, that doesn't count because that was before the spell got started. Like the jumping off point was like, right, she licked a toad, so any consuming of flesh before then doesn't count. So I'm like, oh man, would have been a perfect opportunity. I thought she was going to be like, oh, I already did that. But it's like, no, I guess it doesn't count because maybe it's already worked its way out of her system. Like I said, and then I was like, are you going to go back to that body? But I guess it's not. Once again, either James isn't considered in his prime or because the body's already like rotten. But and then it turns out they're after codes because I guess his is a lot fresher. Which I mean, they died like roughly the same night, but his body's not as old as James. Because I guess both in the prime sense as well as just his body legitimately isn't as old as a dead body. But that's so fascinating. Because there's Ralph not believing that Lisa would kill his nephew, and you have Lou being like, I don't know, dude, that's what she told me. So Ralph ends up finding Christine because he ended up stopping by Lisa's place and found Code dead, which Christine didn't even have time to really process that when that dude literally straight up punched her in the face. I was like, Jesus, this show doesn't hold any punches. The way James went after Lisa in episode 5 and now this, I'm like, wow, that's rough. You know, really quickly before I go ahead, because it just popped in my head, I noticed she didn't spit up a cat this episode. I was like, we are still at the number 6. Thought that was fascinating. I would have expected her to like spew up at least one or maybe double up. Not unless we're tripling up in the finale, but I don't think so. I guess we're kind of potentially done with that now. But I'm like, oh, just interesting. You would stop at 6. But nevertheless, going back to the point, like Ralph getting like the answers out of her he wants. It's like, yo, if I can't blame Lisa, I'm gonna blame you because I'm gonna ultimately assume you had some part to play. So my nephew's alive, right? And she's kind of like, no. He's like, he is alive, right? And she kind of has to reluctantly go like, yes. We never actually find out what happened to Christine. Ralph's enough of a psycho, especially finding out his nephew is dead, that because Christine was like, it was Lisa, it was all Lisa, which I think is so interesting because you were so down for it, but it's like now that your life is in peril. Once again, I find it interesting that the pendulum finally swung the other way. Now, like everyone in Lisa's life is gonna have to pay the price. Code. Now, Christine. Like I said, we don't know if Christine's dead, whether he let her go or not. It's like, right, I'll tell you where to get to Lisa, but I never saw what happened to her, so he could have went crazy and killed her, which would kind of suck. especially considering like Christine was all about like, oh man, I actually really like her now. So we'll have to wait and see whether there's any answer to that in the next episode. But we had Lou tracking down Jonathan and uses that squeaky toy to lead him away. I thought the other biker dude was going to follow too, but just him. So once again, I thought it was interesting. He had nothing to say to Mary, but she just stayed in the bath, didn't move or anything. So I'm like, is she just legitimately like, oh, unaware of what's going on? Like, is she just so relaxed? Or is it what Boro was saying, like, oh, you won't actually be able to get out, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because it's a kind of an inside joke because you think I'm like saying that, like, oh, it's going to be so relaxing, but it's like, no, you legitimately won't be able to get out. We'll have to wait and see on that too, but taking Jonathan, the moment he took Jonathan, I was like, oh, that's not a good thing. Not only because you can't bring your son back, but two, Boro made it clear last episode, like she has to supply them with a certain ingredient. If not, they fall apart, and that happens when Lou starts grabbing his son. It's so sad because him and his son had such a cantankerous relationship, and now it's like he'd give anything to have his boy back. There in that moment, because we had gotten that in the opening, his son wanted like a certain drink, but you had to see that look on Lou's face, almost like he was disappointed, like, oh, because I think for some reason it's like his what was it, like a martini daiquiri, I think is what he ordered, and I think it's because it's not considered a quote unquote masculine drink. So I think Lou was kind of like, yeah, good choice, son. Like, you know, that disappointment of like, right, it's like, oh, maybe you should get a shrimp this or something, and it's like, that's not I don't like shrimp or whatever. But then, like, his son's like, oh, shrimp. And he's like, oh, do you want some shrimp, son? And then pulls the flesh off of his body. It's just like, oh, like, I guess it solidifies more in his mind now. It's like, right, my son's not coming back. There's no saving him from this. So there's that. Then Boro takes Lisa back to her place. And it's like, right, she's like, I don't want to do this to a Code, but it's like, you have no choice. I'll take care of it. And while she's slicing off Code's ear, it hears the banging. And it's like, oh, don't worry, that's just a trap door. And she's like, oh, ignore it. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And it's like, why hasn't it come after me like any other time? Like, why does it need that? She kind of go through the door. It's like, well, here it's a little harder to get through, but it's like, no matter what, it can't touch you or actually hurt you or anything. Regardless, she proceeds to like make it into like an omelet or like fried eggs or whatever. So it's like, cool, eat up. Then Alvin comes over. Hey, got your movie. You can direct it and everything. Cool. Lisa's getting everything she wants. But even now, like, the regret's sinking in. Like, man, I traded my closest friend for my movie. At the very least, it feels like that. So it means, I guess, eating. So for her, like, eating it would be like spitting on him, even more of like taking advantage. He's already dead because of me. I don't want to eat him. She's like, you know, there's only like a little bit of him in there. You won't even realize it. It's like, you have to. Because she even said, like, you know, there's a whole conversation about, yeah, there might be curves in the road, but the destination is always the same. So it's like, hey, look, you might have had some bumps and curves along the way, but look, the destination was the same. You're in a position to get your movie back. Now eat this egg or you will die. And she's like, I don't want you to die. And I was like, so I was like, do you really care about her? And then your boy Ralph shows up. But at the same time, like, the creature grabs onto Lisa, but then kind of moves past her and goes after Boro and starts ripping at her face. I was like, yikes. So to get away from Ralph, she goes down below the trap door. And then we see the couch. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I felt like such an idiot because I forgot about that completely. Because it's like, right, Boro literally made a comment saying like, oh, the Spanish killed the jaguar, probably turned her into a couch. I was like, I completely forgot about that. Because to be fair, like, that was a couple episodes ago, and that has been a couple days for me since then. So I didn't remember that. I was like so bummed at myself for completely forgetting that. To be fair, we saw it the one time, but I was like, oh my God. And then, like, we see the lady with no face sitting there. And it's like, wait, you're the jaguar? It's like, oh, that creature you've been seeing the entire time, not just the one without its face, but the, like, spooky ghost-looking thing has been the jaguar, too. Like, that, both of them are the same thing. So I was like, whoa, it would have never crossed my mind to think that the woman with no face was the jaguar. That's what her real face looks like. And it's like, because it clicked in her head, like, wait. I was like, so your mom's like some jaguar spirit? What? And it's like, yeah, that's why Boro's going to betray you. She's been using this whole thing to get your blood, because getting your blood means getting my blood. So I'm like, okay, so that is what this all been about. That's why she's always taken an interest in Lisa. Because I had thrown it out there, like, last episode, I definitely remember being like, could Lisa be, like, the Jaguar reincarnated or something, and is buried underneath it, she just doesn't realize it? It's like, no. To some extent, I was almost on the right track, but it's like, no, they're legitimately blood-related. And I'm like, that's... What? But how did that happen? How did that work? Especially because she said her dad's alive, so it's like, not unless it's a thing of like most of your life and your background is like 100% BS. It's not unless it's like all that's in your head and you believe that to be reality, but your dad's not really your dad, your life isn't what your life is. Like, that's all a fabrication. Not unless they're going down that route. Not unless I'm completely getting this wrong. And if I am, do let me know. Also, the finale will probably correct me on any mistakes I'm making. But the fact is that, like, she was saying, like, my blood is your blood. So it's like that. She was because even the whole thing of, like, right, can I see your face? Because I've never seen your face before. The whole thing about her mom. So I figured that thing was supposed to be a representation of her mom, but I thought it was just kind of like, a nightmarish representation. But it's like, no, that's what she actually looks like, because the ghost form that's been popping up all over the place is her. So the entire time it's been reaching out to her because it's trying to protect it, the Jaguar trying to protect her daughter from Boro. It's like, Boro's going to betray you. The fact of the matter is, the poison is gone. Like, I guess, like, maybe the whole point was, like, it was BS. Either the Jaguar healed her, or Boro's whole thing was BS. Like, she was sending you down the road, a path she needed you to go, because I guess she needs the Jaguar's blood, because if she can have the Jaguar's blood, then maybe that's an ingredient necessary to like, jump bodies. Or two, it's because it's going to be like a middle finger, because maybe this is a long scale version of revenge of like, right, you killed my wife, even though like I tricked you into killing someone else, but then you figured it out and killed my wife, and then you like ripped off my balls and my arms, and I had to do this whole jumping body thing. Like, I've been running for you for the past 900 years, So maybe this is Boro finally in a position to have the upper hand to finally get her revenge. And it also makes sense the entire time when she's like, ignore it. It's like, yeah, because I don't want your mom swaying you. It's like, you would have thought maybe that's why she's also been pushing things too, because she's trying to escalate things, because she's trying to get this done before the Jaguar has an opportunity to set Lisa on the right path. I don't know. Ralph he finally is able to get through to the trap door, but the Jaguar's already given Lisa a way out. So she exits the building. Lo and behold, who drives by? Roy. He's got his Golden Globe and everything. So excited about it. And, he thought it'd fill some hole in his heart, but it didn't. He thought it would matter, but it didn't. But all he could think about is the time he spent with Lisa. And I'm like, and Lisa's just almost looking like all the crazy shit that I've been dealing with, and that, like, all this is kind of getting thrown at me all at once. It's not even like there's a crazy dude in my place trying to kill me. It's just like she's letting him talk and talk and talk. I was scared. I was like, nah, don't wait till the very end to kill Roy. We already killed Code last episode. Please don't do this. And the bullet ends up striking, because I thought he was going to aim for her and miss and kill Code. I mean, not Code, but Roy. But it does hit Lisa. And then he aims at Roy, and then Roy, the bullet literally bounces off his Golden Globe. I was like, Roy, you are a lucky bastard. You're definitely going to die in the finale. You're building up too much negative karma. Like, all this luck of you surviving. You've even said, like, oh, I should be dead. No, it's like, dude, you're going to bite it super hard in the finale. I could just get the feeling. I want you to live, because also, once again, it's Jeff Ward. It's Deke from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So there's that. But I'm like, you're going to bite it super hard in that. I know it's going to suck. But, like, to survive like that was super lucky. So, okay. So, obviously, I've done a lot of throwing spaghetti to the wall and seeing what sticks. I'm so interested to see how this ends, because it does definitely seem like we are, well, because it was also like the Jaguars, like, finish what you need to. So I'm assuming that's the whole Lou thing. Like, you're going to go to Lou, you're going to kill him, potentially get your movie back, maybe even direct it. I don't know how that's all going to shake out. Plus, you got Ralph on your tail trying to kill you. Once again, what happened to Christine? what's going to happen with this whole Jaguar thing. Like, what about Burrow? Are we going to get a twist where, like, Burrow jumps into Mary's body at the end? Is that going to be the end of Mary's story? Because I'd also want her to kind of get payback for Mary killing Code, but I don't know, man. It's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where the finale takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.